All right. Welcome, everyone. We are live on Facebook. Hello. My name is Jordan Bain, and this podcast is called Unveiling. My guest tonight is Rachel Miller. Her and I are both healers and teachers in the Modern Mystery School, and we've known each other for about 5 years now. So Rachel lives out on the West Coast in the Seattle area, and I, of course, live in Boston. So thank you for joining me tonight on this podcast, Rachel. It's a pleasure to see you. I don't think I've seen you in like a year and a half now in person, so it's great that we could do this together.
Totally. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Do you want to say a little bit about yourself and maybe how you found this work and how
Yeah,
that relates to?
absolutely. So yeah, I am out here in Seattle. I actually, as Jordan mentioned, met him in 2015 out in Boston when I was living there. So yeah, I've now been doing the modern mystery school path. I'm also a teacher, healer, ritual master within this lineage, and ultimately just trying to help people live their best lives possible. Reach their fullest potential and live lives of joy and amazingness. And so, yeah, excited to talk more about that through tonight's theme.
Awesome. So tonight we're talking about overcoming fear. And sometimes we have different formats for these podcasts. So sometimes I interview people. About a month and a half ago, one of the students at the Modern Mystery School interviewed me. And tonight, Rachel and I discussed this beforehand. We said, why don't we interview each other? So we're kind of going to go back and forth and ask each other questions and both share our stories about our experiences with fear and how we've used this work with the Modern Mystery School to overcome fears and make make a really different relationship in our lives with fear and how we interact with that. So, Rachel,
Mm.
I'd love if you can share, when you first found this work, what was your relationship with fear? Like, what was fear in your life? Because we all experience fear in some way, and
Mhm.
how did you interact with fear back then, 5 years ago?
Yeah. No, that's an amazing question to start with, actually. So I would say fear potentially even played a part in me finding this path.
Interesting.
When I think back to 5 years ago, fear was probably like an everyday occurrence for me. I felt a lot of anxiety. So the fear showed up in my life as anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really, I felt really out of control of my life. I felt that life was happening to me. And um, I often felt a little bit like hopeless. Like, is this as good as life is going to get?
Mm-hmm.
I had achieved a lot of the societal things I felt I was supposed to achieve, as far as having, a really well-paying job, a good set of friends. Um, but ultimately, there was a part of me that felt unfulfilled, and that led me to just feeling fearful of life, of kind of hopelessness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where a lot of people, like even clients I work with today, are at with their lives in fear, is just kind of feeling um, whether it be stuck or unsure of what direction they're going in. Are they doing things right? And I think it's often comparing ourselves to something outside of ourselves, whether it be a societal timeline that we feel we should be hitting, what we've been told we should do by parents or other people who maybe have mentored us throughout the years. But a lot of times I think it's coming from a disconnect of what it is that we truly want, right?
Mm. That's huge. Yeah.
Yeah,
When
can you
we're
relate
not,
to that at all? I mean,
yeah, when we're not plugged in with ourselves, it's easy to get into fear.
yeah,
Uh, and
totally.
and so much of fear can be just not being tapped in with your center of yourself, with your core, with who you are. Um, what shifted for you, or what was your experience as you found this work and as you got initiated with how you changed your relationship with fear in those, maybe first when you found this, when you got life activated, when you got initiated,
Mm.
whatever the timeline was for you, what shifted?
Yes, I mean so much. But so initially I think it was a moment of fear of like ultimate helplessness, feeling
Mm,
out of control of my life that led me to the mystery school, as I said, that led me actually to finding you. Um, so it was a moment of actually breaking down and praying for the first time in I don't know how many years it had been, of
mm,
just kind of asking, like, hey, if there is more to life, God, which I feel there is, please help me. And so I started searching and I ended up finding your website. And the first time I was like, what is this? It was, I wouldn't, maybe fear came up because I was like, I don't know what this is at all.
mm,
And then a couple months later, I was doing the same search and found you again. So there's a little bit of synchronicity that ultimately played
mm,
out there. But I would say for me personally, I know some people run up against fear when they maybe run into the mystery school because it isn't maybe as well known as some of the other healing modalities that exist out there. But
Mhm.
for me, when I met with you, I remember actually feeling a lot of joy of like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been looking for. And I felt hope
Mm,
for the first time, even though the life activation and a lot of things you mentioned, I was like, huh? Like what? Okay. Um, but I think what's shifted, after following my intuition and following my heart, after doing life activation, empower thyself, the biggest shift has been that I now feel in control of my life. And so many of the teachings that were handed down in that Empower Thyself class, it was like, finally, I was like, this makes so much sense. Like,
mm,
this is why I didn't feel in control of my life. I didn't know some of these key foundational teachings that have been around for thousands of years that it was like my soul knew that there was some core foundational stuff I should just know for being,
mm.
here on the planet.
Yeah.
And so that was such a shift for me. I mean, that was like the most truly so empowering and helped me overcome fear in many ways. And it's evolved
Mm.
from there, but I'll just pause there.
That's cool. It's
Yeah.
it's funny you say that too, because I think when I mean, we're all in different places when we find the school, but when I first found the mystery school
Yeah.
and Empower Thyself initiation, I don't think I remembered anything from the class. Like to agree with it or disagree with it. I was like, huh? What happens? Because there was so much energy that weekend during the
Yeah.
class that I felt like my soul was going through these transformations and my brain was just like
Gone.
gone. I don't even know what was said or what happened. I obviously I was there. I was conscious the entire weekend, but it wasn't something that even like a week later I was able to really retain. You would ask me like, well, what did you took this seminar last weekend, initiation, like what did you learn? I'd be like, let me look at the manual. I'm not really sure. So
Yeah, no, it's true. I guess we all experience it so differently, right? And I
mhm.
know you're really sensitive to energies in general.
Yeah.
But still, I'm sure, I mean, for you, I'm just curious, like before you found the mystery school, then, I mean, I'm sure fear played a role in your life as well. Did it look similar to mine, or would you say it was a little bit different?
It was different. I mean, when I first found the school, one of my main I'd really been on a spiritual path, seeking for a long time, doing different trainings. I had a professional spiritual healing practice, doing shamanic healing, um, doing Reiki, doing different types of work like intuitive readings, psychic readings, whatever you'd like to call that for people. And that was actually going pretty well. Like I was seeing a good number of clients, and I just knew. So the fear affected me in several different ways. One, I always had this feeling through my entire life, I guess, even from childhood, that there was like a doubt that would go through me all the time around where am I in my life? Am I doing the right things? So similar in some ways to what you're sharing about. Am I doing the right things? Like, is this thing that I'm doing right now, whether it's a job or a course of academic study? I think I changed my major in college like 6 times because I was trying to make sure I was studying the right thing that was
Yeah.
going to, and the conflict there was huge as well because I was not in my center around that. There's a part of me, I think my junior year in college, my advisor looked at me and I'd been studying, physics. I'd been studying pre-med. I'd been studying art and painting and theater and acting and directing. And, my favorite class was chemistry. And like, I loved gardening and farming and all these different things. And in studying anthropology and religion, I had really focused a lot of my studies around shamanism and like indigenous belief systems and practices. And my advisor looked at me one day and he was like, "Do you want to study shamanism or do you want to be a shaman?" And I was like, I felt like I had just been busted by the police or something. Like it
Yeah.
was this question that like
You're like,
crumbled my inner world. So I was like, yeah, I want to be in the Amazon studying shamanism. I don't want to be here in upstate New York at this college for 4 years. And I've already been here 2.5 years. Uh-oh, like if I drop out now, and then all the fears of what that would mean if I like dropped out and went and studied
Mhm.
something else and didn't finish my degree and like let down my parents or like let down the world or let down my uh, own expectations of myself that you're supposed to go to college for 4 years in a row and like get a degree and be super successful in something. And I knew I wasn't headed on that track of like I'm going to get a degree and then use that degree to be successful. I was like, whatever degree I get, I'm probably going to put it on the shelf.
Yeah.
But I felt like I had to get it anyway. So that was a level of fear.
Mm.
Even before I had a healing practice and all that stuff, which happened shortly after college. So, so that one level of fear for me was always like, am I in the right place?
Mm.
Am I studying the right thing? Am I in the right relationship? I'm I'm someone who's naturally more of like a romantic who like desires to be in relationships. So I had basically from the time I had my first relationship when I was like 16, 17 years old, I'd always been in a relationship. And it was always like, is this the right relationship? And, how is this relationship helping me to grow? And am I in the right place at the right time? So these fears might seem silly to someone else because everyone has different kinds of fears. But to me, these fears would always eat me up. And I
Yeah.
would spend a lot of my energy wondering or journaling or dreaming or meditating or praying or trying to answer these questions for myself. And, when we spend our energy in one place, we don't really have it to spend in other places.
Totally.
So fear for me was holding me back in all sorts of ways, but I had no way out of that. And in finding the mystery school, the other practices that I had done prior to the mystery school hadn't really relieved those fears, like other spiritual practices and paths. I started doing yoga when I was 17, and throughout college, I did yoga 3, 4, 5 days a week,
Mm.
intensive practices. I'd take classes that were offered at my college. I would do practices on my own, and in yoga, I would get a few minutes of relief in shavasana, lying down at the end of the yoga class. I would just finally feel a sense of peace where my mind would shut off and my fears would go away. Then I would stand up and roll up my yoga mat, walk out the door, and 2 minutes later, I'd be back in fear.
Totally.
At the time, honestly, Rachel, I didn't call it fear. And I think that's true for a lot of people.
What was it?
I didn't have a name for it. I was just like, these are my concerns and this is me. I just
Yeah.
called it fear.
Yeah.
Like, this is how I think about life. Kind of like what you're saying, is this as good as it gets? I was like, yeah, am I ever going to be over this?
Right.
Am I ever going to not have these questions? And I didn't really even think it could be a reality that I would not have those questions.
Totally.
So that was probably the biggest thing for me. And when I got initiated, that literally changed, I would say within a week or two.
Mm.
It was dramatic for me. I got initiated in July 2005. And by the end of July, I didn't worry about stuff like that anymore. I wasn't wondering, is this the right time and place? Am I doing the right thing? I was just, and the fears that had held me back, like I left my job because I had a part-time job and I had a healing practice. And I was like, I'm going to go full time and do my healing practice, which worked well for a while and then totally went belly up and flopped because I didn't have enough training and I didn't have enough like internal core structure and strength within myself to really hold a space for other people long term. So I totally flopped my healing practice and like gave up my office that I had and went on this whole other quest for a year to just self-heal. And then I reopened a healing practice and then that didn't go so well. And then I reopened another one again a year later and finally that was successful. So it's like I had to go through a lot of different phases. But
Yeah.
that whole time, if I had tried to do any of that stuff before mystery school, I would have frozen because of the fear.
Totally.
And when all these changes came up and all these waves of transformation were rolling through my life, I was able to flow with it
Mm.
and not hold myself back and just say, oh, I need to go do this now. Okay, I'm going to do this. Like I need to go start a business doing this. Like I started a business cleaning houses. That was just me. I put like flyers up around the town that I lived in and I just cleaned people's houses. And I did that for a few years because I realized I wasn't emotionally, psychically, mentally, energetically stable enough back then, 14, 15 years ago to have a full-time healing practice serving other people. And I was quite young and I didn't have the life experience and the wisdom to do that either. So I needed to earn money some other way. And I would have been so scared to do something like that. Everyone has a different orientation of the world, but for me, I was very naturally shy and didn't want to put myself out there.
Mm-hmm.
And now, I mean, people are like, you don't want to put yourself out there. You have a podcast. Are you kidding? And you teach classes and what it's almost unthinkable from who I was back then. But it
Totally.
started shifting like that after initiation.
Totally agree. I mean, yeah, with initiation. And that's one of the hardest things to sometimes for me to get across to someone because it's for me, initiation, it's one of those things where kind of what you were describing, like the fears that you used to deal with were more like almost running in circles with worry of like, am I doing the right thing? Am I choosing the
Mm.
right path for myself? And similar to me too, like, is this as good as life is going to get? And then suddenly to have initiation to give you, I don't know, it's almost like your box is broken open and you have such a
Mm.
different perspective of your life that those just kind of like fall away. It's like that noise
Right.
just falls away. And sometimes it's so hard for me to like even help people to see that there is hope or that there's that option because it's like how do you give someone that perspective? It's something that they have to feel themselves to really then be able to look at their old version of themselves and see it, you
Yeah,
know?
definitely.
But
Absolutely. It's, fear comes up in a lot of ways. And as you were saying a little while ago, one of the fears I think people face when they're at a precipice of a decision, like, should I get initiated or should I do something differently in my life, is just the inertia of comfort, like their comfort zone, where
yeah.
they're already at. And people don't tend to break their comfort zone until it's not comfortable anymore. Because what's the incentive to break your comfort zone?
That's a really great point, actually. That's so true. I mean, no matter even now, I still can see that pattern play out in my life, right?
Right.
Where it becomes bigger and bigger levels of what that looks like. But you're so right. It's like what's ultimately gonna be more painful is like staying where you're at or realizing I need to really make a change and try something new. And they're both scary in different ways, but
Yeah, and being that it's a mystery school, you know, like I have many friends who have done like landmark forum, you know,
Mm, I've heard of that a lot,
and
actually. Yeah.
and it's something where you can kind of, and there's some mystery around what's taught in landmark forum for people who are not in it, but it's not like the mystery school in terms of I'm not saying better or worse, just a different approach
Hmm.
to like you're going to learn certain things and you're going to have certain insights and you're going to ask certain questions about yourself, but it's really based on like you and like what you take yourself through, the
Hmm.
processes that you take yourself through. Whereas initiation in the mystery school, you came to the school and you felt like life was happening to you.
Hmm.
When you get initiated, you feel much more in charge and in control of your life. But at the same time, the energy of initiation is driving a certain level of transformation 24 hours a day. That's not about you sitting in a class doing a process. It's not about you, writing in your journal. It's not about you doing a meditation, although all those things are good and accelerate your progression in life.
Hmm.
Um, it's simply the initiation itself is this mystical experience of becoming more connected with who you are all the time.
Totally.
And that is, I follow up with students usually a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks after I initiate them. And, the initiation class is usually small groups of people, like 5 or 10 people, sometimes even less, sometimes a little bit more, but always small groups of people. And
Mhm.
so I follow up with each person individually and I see where they're at. And people are in such radically different places in their life before
Mhm.
coming into initiation and then after initiation. And most people don't really know what happened to them for about a year.
Mhm.
I'd say it takes, I don't know what your experience was with
Yeah, like,
realizing what initiation had done or what had changed for you. What would you say?
yeah, I mean, I guess in hindsight, so much did shift, right? And I just
Mhm.
remember feeling really empowered. Like I remember it was a relief because for the first time, and I don't know how long, I felt connected to myself in a way that I hadn't felt since I was younger, and I just had this clarity around what I wanted. And
Mm,
so even though I made a lot of big decisions, I quit my corporate job.
mm,
Within 8 months, I moved out west. And
mm,
even though these were big outer shifts that I was making, it was driven by an inner knowing of like I'm ready for this. So it was really exciting. And I remember, friends witnessing it were like, "Wow, I'm really inspired by like how you
mm,
all these decisions you're making." And I'm like, I mean, this, yeah, it was the gift of initiation. But when I
mm,
think about fear, I do think that pre mystery school and pre finding this path, that my fear was always probably connected to just really being out of touch with myself, like really not having that connection to myself and being so focused on the outer world that I didn't even know how to go inward. And so that's probably the
mm.
greatest gift that initiation gave me was like this somehow this light came back within me in a way that I hadn't experienced for a really long time, you know?
That's super cool. And it's interesting that you're saying that from someone who is really externally focused. I was someone coming from this total opposite perspective. I was super internally focused.
Yeah.
for years and years before finding the school. Like I started having a spiritual awakening when I was like 11,
Mhm.
and then um, went through so many different phases of build up and breakdown and build up and breakdown from that time until age 24 when I first found the school. That you're saying, like, you had this great circle of friends. Like my great circle of friends was in college, and by the time I had left college, I had like just like leveled that circle of friends to like myself only,
Mm.
because there when you start to really wake up. I mean, if you're someone who you start to wake up and all your friends start to spontaneously wake up at the same time as you, amazing. I have not heard that story from most people.
I
That's
know.
like not what happens for most people in their lives. And it's definitely not what happened for me. Like I went on my journey of awakening. All my friends are like, wow, that's really cool that you're doing that. I totally can't relate to you anymore. I'm going to go have a drink at the bar and totally numb out. And I was like, I'm going to go meditate for 3 hours and totally tune in. And we just, I didn't like torch any friendships or like, blow up the bridge on any friendships. It's just like, I didn't have anyone to hang out with anymore
Mm.
because there was nothing to talk about. There was nothing like, it's like, yeah, I love doing angel healing. And they were like,
They're
right.
like, cool, bro.
What is that? And you seem like like you're really happy, so we're happy for you. But when you have nothing in common with your friends anymore, you don't stay friends with them
Yeah.
because you're not. I mean, those people, like I still actually see occasionally, every year or 2 or 3 years, like some of those people were still in touch, and they're like, "Wow, you inspire me in my life," or "You were this turning point person who came into my life and inspired me at a certain point."
Hmm.
So they might look up to me and I admire them and we have mutual respect, but they're not people who I'm spending time with.
Yeah.
Um, Even if the love that was there as friends is still there in my heart, we spend time with people who we have similarities with and who we are, kind of on the same track with in our
Totally.
lives, like our community. Um, so you came from this external perspective that you're saying, where you were really focused out there in the world, and it was difficult to connect with your core self.
Mm. Yeah. And you were
I
totally,
can Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and you said you were the opposite. You
And I
were
was the opposite, but it was still hard to connect with my core self,
Oh,
which is kind of paradoxical. So I spent all my time meditating, doing healing work, especially from maybe about age 22 until 24. So there was this solid 2 years of my life where I was like, I'm going to be a professional spiritual healer. I know this is my path. I know this is what I want. And I hadn't found the mystery school yet. And I took that really seriously. I took all sorts of healer trainings that I spent thousands and thousands of dollars on before I found the mystery school. I studied shamanism with this group of women in upstate New York that had studied with different shamans and healers all over the world. And I did different apprenticeships with them and with, a guy who did hands-on healing and Rosicrucian healing and Native American shamanic healing. And I studied angel healing and therapy, and I studied Reiki. And I took all these classes in college and right after college, and I moved back to Boston, where I'm from originally.
Mhm.
And I did a really intensive like healing and meditation retreat for 3.5 months, just like literally shut myself in my room at my apartment, quit my job for 3.5 months, like did nothing but meditate 12 hours a day. And so, despite all of that, I still felt disconnected from myself. And most people would be like, how is that possible? I mean, do you have a problem? Like, how could you not be connected to yourself after 3.5 months of 12 hours a day of meditation?
Yeah.
And of course, I was more connected, but I still felt like there was something really big lacking and that I hadn't overcome my fears. That fears still really ran a large chunk of my life. And it wasn't until initiation that turned around within like a couple of weeks and started
What was that?
shifting.
I mean, can you put it into words, or is it just like an internal shift where you're like, wow, I feel different?
I think it's just the power of initiation. It's not something, even though I've been initiating other people now for almost 10 years, um, I can't really tell people what that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not everyone's necessarily sensitive enough to notice it in that short of a time frame. But I
Mm.
think most people within a few months are starting to make changes after initiation. They're starting to really see themselves in a way that is much more empowering, where they feel more in charge of their daily thoughts and emotions, and not so run by subconsciousness anymore.
Yes. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's beautiful. And I actually I knew a lot about your story, but I'd never put together the whole internal versus external
Mhm.
difference, but still how there was so much parallel similarity there too. That's
Yeah.
cool.
in terms of what we were both asking for, and the things that we were facing in terms of our fears, um, how would you say now, like since 5 years ago, because it's been 5 years since initiation for you,
Mm.
what's changed overall? Like, what is your approach to life now in terms of how do you handle fears when fears come up for you? And maybe what are fears for you now? Like, what is your new relationship that's developed with fear?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it definitely has changed, I would say. And now I feel that fear um, plays a positive role in my life. I had
Mm,
one of my teachers within the mystery school. I don't remember her exact quote, but she actually in a class once was talking about fear and said, um, fear is one of our greatest assets because essentially it's highlighting where your greatest potential lies. Meaning
mm,
that on the other side of that fear, we're usually blocking a lot of light and there's a lot of potential there. So now I kind of use fear as a gauge of like, this is good because I'm pushing outside of my comfort zone.
mm,
So usually
mhm,
fear for me is like how can I expand more? How can I really look at what I want to create in my life? And how do I take action around that even when fear does come up? So for me, it can look a lot of like fear of, I don't know, like even this, like being seen, speaking about mystery school path or just something I'm really passionate about in front of a group of people. Um, yeah, presenting something, creating something, and then presenting that to people. I mean, there's fear around that for me personally, and I'm sure that looks different for all of us, but I don't have the same fear around, is my life going in the right direction? Because now I feel so much more clear on what it is I want to create. And I feel I have tools now through the mystery school to work with myself and, angels and beings of light that are here to support us that I feel really supported, in that. Yeah.
yeah, it's funny you're saying that, because as you were talking, I was really thinking how so much of what we do is about energy.
Hmm.
I mean, in life as humans, always, but especially in the mystery school, we're using tools of energy. And when we can change our energy, it's like our mind can change, our emotions can change, our experience can change, and it can change instantly.
Yeah.
Like when you use mystery school tools, like different rituals that are handed down, or sacred geometry, or certain meditation techniques, you can shift your energy so quickly into a new way of being that those frequencies that were related to fear just sort of fall away,
Mm.
and they're not so present in your life anymore. And you do those rituals or those practices, you do them, in the morning, you do them in the evening, you do them whenever, you set those in your schedule, and they just start to build up this baseline of positive energy, which is, you know, for a lot of people who are on a spiritual path, sensitivity is a huge question, like
Yeah.
being sensitive to energies. And for someone who's not really on a spiritual path, sometimes sensitivity is also a big question. Some
Mm.
people are just really not particularly sensitive, and that's fine. That's great. That's everyone's built and constructed differently in
Mhm.
terms of energies. And some people sensitivity is not part of their life experience. But for a lot of people that I meet, I mean, I've worked with thousands of clients, and I'd say a vast majority of them who come to me are having trouble dealing with energy, whether they realize that or not. And most realize it. Most realize, like, I take on negative energies from other people. That's
Mhm.
one of the things I hear most commonly from sensitive people, is like walking into a room, I get overwhelmed easily, even if there's just a few people in the room, if there's anything negative going on in that space.
Yeah.
Or the subconscious unprocessed emotions of people around us, especially in like a work environment or family environment, which can be really like high pressure and charged. Family for a different set of reasons than work, but work, a lot of corporate environments for people, the expectation of performance is high,
Mhm.
and the expectation of emotional transparency and communication is low.
Mhm.
Like really telling people what you think and feel, and really someone asks you how you are, you don't unload on them in a corporate environment around like, well, here's how I'm actually doing. I'm actually doing really crappy today.
Right.
Life is not good. I just fought with my spouse. Um, I'm dealing with all these issues. Like, my parents are going through bad health crises. I got in a car accident last week and I'm dealing with this insurance claim and I'm just stressed out. And like, you don't say that when someone asks you at your corporate job, like, how are you? You're like,
Because
I'm good.
like to do your job.
Right. Because that's not why you're there. You're not there to like emotionally express with people around you. And yet we spend 60 hours a week in these environments for many people. And now with COVID, it's a little bit different. And a lot of people that I've talked to are actually super relieved that they don't have to go into an office and make small talk with other people.
Mm.
They're
Mhm.
like, thank God I don't have to do that anymore. That was so stressful, because the inauthenticity of it put this like constant baseline emotional psychic pressure on them.
Totally.
But at some point COVID will be over and people will possibly go back to that environment. Some people are like, I never want to go back to that environment. I'm done. I think that's been a cool change actually for a lot of people in the corporate world with COVID, is like realizing they can do their jobs from home. I've had many clients who work in the corporate world who, especially at higher level, like manager jobs and positions, or in more tech oriented companies, they're like, our company is closing their offices
Yeah.
and we're never going back to work. And only like because there's a lot of tech companies in Boston, just like there are in Seattle, different kinds of tech. But here there's a lot of biotech where, 50 to 70% of the company can easily work from home. And then the other stuff maybe is in labs, and that's all in downtown Boston or in in the suburbs around Boston. So maybe some people have to go to their like lab sciencey type jobs, but
Mhm.
a lot of people can now not deal with the stress of BSing it, pardon my French,
Yeah.
with their coworkers and lying. Oh, I'm,
Yeah.
I'm great, because they're not great. That
To
that
manage all the energies of an office, like you're saying.
Yeah, what do you do with the emotions of people around you if you're working in an office with 10 people and no one's being honest?
Mm.
How do you handle that emotionally? Because we are all sensitive beings on some level, even if we don't realize it, even if we stuffed it down and we think, well, I'm not sensitive, like we still are affected by those energies. So you've got 10 nervous, anxious people who are living in fear, but they're pretending they're not living in fear. And you're a sensitive person, that environment's going to wear on you.
Totally.
For most people, initiation is this enormous change. Initiation does so many different things for people, but if that was the only thing that it did, it would still be worth it for them, because they're able to deal with people's energies that before had a huge impact on them, and now the impact is super minimal.
Yeah. Well, that paired with the rituals you get to, right? To do
Right,
daily. Yeah.
exactly. So that was
100%.
noticeable for me immediately right after initiation. I walked in my job the next day and no one bothered me. It just didn't bother me anymore. I was like, okay, hi, how are you? You're miserable? Okay. You're telling me you're great, but you're miserable? Well, I'm actually doing great now. Okay, cool. I love you. I didn't have to say any of that, but
Yeah.
more and more after initiation, people would ask me like, how are you so happy all the time?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I know. I mean, I can totally relate. I used to walk around shopping malls like in high school and would feel really depressed afterwards. And I always thought like, oh, I just don't like being inside all day. I'm really sensitive. I need sunlight. And then, now
Mhm.
I'm like, oh my gosh, no, I was just like really picking up on all the energy in the shopping mall and thinking it was mine. So I know so many clients too that I work with, like same thing. I'm like, you are so sensitive to all these energies and it's not really your fear or anxiety. You're just picking up on other energies around you.
Right. And it's funny when people don't know that, because they're kind of in for an awakening. They
Yeah.
come to the mystery school and they get initiated and they realize that half of what they were feeling wasn't even their own.
Which, like you said, if that's even as far as they go with the mystery school, like that gift alone is priceless. To be able to
Absolutely.
operate in life, at least knowing, hey, this is my energy and not somebody else's.
Right. And having the tools to parse that out daily, to separate out. It's like alchemy. Like you're separating out, one substance from another. Like this is my emotional stuff. This is your emotional stuff. This is
Mm,
what I actually think. This is what the collective consciousness thinks. This is my subconscious garbage, and this is higher truth. And
totally.
like that kind of discernment over time also reduces fear, because
Mm,
we start focusing more on the truth of who we are. We
mhm.
start focusing on the truth of situations.
Yeah.
We say that discernment is like, it's almost like a new job description when you get initiated. you
Yeah.
know you you have a job, you're a mom, you're a salesperson, you're a friend. Those are all like job descriptions, roles that you play. But then there's also discernment. Are you doing your job discerning? Like, what is the truth? Who are you? Is that the voice of your, higher intuitive knowing, or is that your ego that's going to drag you down into your own shadows and play games with you and spin dramas and make life harder than it needs to be?
Yeah, no, that's actually a good point too, which I loved from Empower Thyself is a lot of the fear is coming from the negative ego, which again, prior to that class, I don't think I would have had a clear understanding of how to differentiate the two.
Mm,
Now, even knowing like, oh, this is actually my negative ego, this isn't even really me. A lot of times that helps me stop fear in its tracks because I'm like, this is like an irrelevant fear. Like I'm worrying about something that like clearly I can control or, you know,
mm-hmm.
so that was super valuable too. Some of that particular teaching and Empower Thyself. But
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious for you, Jordan. I mean, because you've been on the path longer than me, and so reversing back to before you found the mystery school to now, all the work you've done, all the clients that you've
Mm.
worked with, and I mean, how does fear show up in your life? Does fear even show up in your life still?
Mm. It's a really interesting question. See,
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like ready for questions, and other times I'm like, whoa, I'm not ready for that question.
Jordan Bain feel fear. I'm actually
How
curious.
does it show up in my life? So I'm honestly at the point where I have very few fears.
Mm,
I wouldn't say any of my fears are personal anymore.
mm,
I don't have fears around relationships. I don't have fears around my health. I don't have fears around money, finances. I don't have any fears around my purpose. But that's not totally true about purpose. I'll get into that in a minute. I don't have fears about my personal experience of my purpose. Um, I don't have fears about death. I don't have fears about what people will think about me. I don't have fears about family, friends. Like none of those human things produce fear for me, nor
mm,
even really normal, what would be called normal human emotional attachments. Like in the mystery school, as we do Kabbalah, as we do the ritual master path, as we walk the path of initiation, a lot of the normal human emotional attachments that we think are just part of being human slowly dissolve because they're really part of having a subconscious mind that's attached to the past.
mm,
They're not about present time. When we really live in present time and we've reduced our subconscious mind to only a whisper, that most of the things that transpire through us are conscious. If 90% of the things that go through your mind are conscious thoughts, then there's not really a lot to be afraid of. I'll say what's happened to me over the last 5 years, and a huge part of this was training to become a Kabbalah teacher and becoming a Kabbalah teacher in mystery school, which is an enormous amount of work and training and purification of the self to be able
mm,
to hold a space for large groups of people to go climb the tree of life and have a face-to-face meeting with their God self,
mm,
with
mm.
their divinity, with their inner highest essence.
Yeah.
To be able to take a group through that, you have to really purify your own tree of life, which is saying your own blueprints, which is saying your own spiritual DNA, which is saying your own subconscious mind. Those are all the same thing.
Yeah.
So in that purification process, especially over the last 5 to 6 years, really started that process in 2014 of the formal apprenticeship and studies to teach Kabbalah. After having done Kabbalah for 8 years before that, since 2006 as a student, um, more and more the last 5 years, it's been about like, where is the planet going?
Mm,
What's happening in the world, and like, how can I have the biggest possible impacts for the good in
mm,
that? So this podcast is part of that because it's gotten to the point now, after serving thousands of clients in person, one-on-one, and in classes in a room, Yeah, we've got a huge teaching space here, but we can only fit, even without COVID, 100 people.
Mhm.
So how am I going to change the world reaching 100 people at a time
Yeah.
with 7+ billion people? That's not going to happen. Not in the
Yeah.
time frame that's needed, I think, to just shift and reverse, regardless of whatever your politics is, to shift and reverse things like with the climate, with the environment, to shift and reverse humans doing all sorts of stuff to ourselves, both in terms of our policies and politics, in terms of science and technology. Um, as more and more technologies advance faster and faster, like genetic engineering and artificial intelligence, are we going to just destroy ourselves with these things?
Mm.
As we make more and more chemicals, there's over like 80,000 industrial chemicals that are rampant in our bodies, and any lab that goes to test people for these chemicals, have most of them in their bodies.
Mm.
They're just falling out of the sky. They're in the food we eat. They're in the water we drink. They're in the air we breathe. And it's a wonder we're still walking around with all that stuff. And I don't see those issues like climate and the environment and toxicity and how we treat people in other countries, or how we treat people with different skin colors, or how we treat people who think differently than us, or how we treat men versus women. Like, to me, those are all one thing. Those are
Mm.
all connected, and they're connected to awakening.
Yeah.
The problems are many, but the answer is one thing, and that's waking up to
Yep.
who we are. So for me, my fears are that we won't wake up fast enough as a collective for us to live in a meaningful, beautiful, green, lush world that is non-toxic, that is not just populated by soulless robots or zombies, or genetically engineering the soul out of our bodies. And it's possible to do these things, and we're on our way. So can we stop the destruction course that we're on fast enough by enough people waking up? That's my fear.
Yeah.
That's what I wake up with in the morning. It's like, okay, so it's a healthy fear, because it helps drive my awareness levels of
Yeah.
like, well, what do I need to be aware of in the world? Like, where are people? Is the problem with the United States right now whether a Democrat or a Republican won, or is the problem unity consciousness versus division, civil unrest, and strife?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Like, is Biden different than Trump? Of course, their policies are different. Is one better than the other ultimately in the long-term range of humanity? Probably not.
Mm.
Hope I'm not offending like every single viewer, because half the viewers voted for Biden, half the viewers voted for Trump. Everyone's now offended. I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry. um it's just is what it is. In the mystery school, like, part of mystery school studies is hermetics, and hermetics means purity, and purity means having no opinion.
Yeah.
No opinion doesn't mean you sit there with like an IQ of 20 and don't think about anything. No opinion means you don't get involved in the drama of the pendulum swing going back and forth from Democrat to Republican, from this ideology to that ideology. You are able to stay in the center, and you're
Right.
able to not get sucked in with popular opinion. And in the mystery school tradition, sometimes that ability to do that is called truth against the world, where you are standing not against the world to fight the world, but you're like, no, I'm going to stay in my center, and
Mm.
everyone around me can fight about their opinions, but I'm not going to get pulled into their opinions.
Right.
So I, as a ritual master, as a Kabbalah teacher, as a guide, like, I have to look at and be aware of what's going on in the world. But I also have to not get sucked into it. And
Right.
the process of awakening, I've asked my guidance again and again and again. I can always be wrong, but I've asked, of course, something we all want to know, which is like, when is COVID going to be over? And every single time I ask this question, the answer is when humanity wakes up.
Mm.
Like, COVID will be done when people wake up. I'm not trying to assign any kind of agency to COVID. I'm not saying it was God. I'm not saying it was the devil. I'm not saying it was the angels, the demons, or the aliens, or the deep state, or China, or anyone person or entity in particular. But for whatever happened and whatever is now, it's not going to be fully over in terms of its effects in our lives until people really wake up.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see, honestly, over the next 10 years, more and more scenarios like that, where humanity is presented with really difficult scenarios and situations that won't end until people wake up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a rock and a hard place, honestly, because I know from my own journey of waking up what the mystery school has done for me. I know how hard it is to wake up without this work, and meditating 12 hours a day still didn't fully wake me up.
Yeah.
But not everyone's going to go do mystery school, but we can tell people about it, and maybe more people will wake up. We'll see what happens. I don't know. That's part of the hope of this podcast is people see this kind of stuff, and one person here sees it and someone over here sees it, and it gets shared, and then thousands of people see it and realize that there are ways to reliably wake up, to reliably step out of fear, to reliably step into unity consciousness. So whether I can call that a fear or not, I don't know, but I do have a concern or a fear that I would call it a fear
Yeah, I
that
think it's
humanity won't wake up fast enough, and that the world will become so polluted and so overly focused on the mind, and still like the science and the technology over spirituality, that we will literally destroy ourselves or make the planet so uninhabitable that, like, who wants to live there? Because the soul needs beauty. At the
yeah.
center of the soul in Kabbalah is beauty.
Yep.
That's the center point of the soul. And if we live in a world that is no longer a reflection of divine beauty, the soul crumbles and doesn't feel itself. It doesn't feel its beauty anymore. And whether we're aware of it or not, everyone wants to feel that way. Everyone seeks and strives for a good, positive, beautiful experience of life.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
like, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You could also say life, liberty, and the pursuit of beauty, like the
Totally.
beauty of the soul. So I hope that people wake up and we can all enjoy that together.
Mm.
Like John
No,
Lennon or something.
that was beautiful, Jordan. I mean, you can hear your passion and your conviction and just like, yeah, how much you care about that. I mean, ultimately you care deeply about people waking up so we can create this new world together. And I think I mean, that just goes to show that how your fears have shifted to like, am I making the right choice? Am I choosing the right major? To now you're at a place of thinking about the world as a whole and how do I help as many people as possible? And I know that all of us have that same deep desire within. And,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but I think it's like the little noise and the little fears that a lot of people get stuck in. And I hope that through this podcast, people realize like there is a path and there's tools out there to help them find that piece that they're really passionate about as well.
Yeah.
Because everybody has their role to play, whether it's like people who feel that passionate about global warming and finding fixes to where we're at with that issue, or the healthcare industry or whatever it is. It's like everybody has their purpose and their passion, and we need people to wake up to that and
Mm-hmm.
to let that be the fears that they're tackling instead of little fears like, yeah, am I making the right choice, or fear of anxiety through just going out into society because it feels so overwhelming to them, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And we
Help.
talk about that in mystery school in terms of awareness and focus, and like what we choose to focus on, and what we really care about is going to really determine so much of our reality.
Mm,
So by making more conscious choices around where we're putting our attention, where we're placing um, our will, like what we're doing in our lives, and not keeping our vision low to the ground, but really looking forward um, to our greater selves and who we can really be. So
yeah, absolutely. I feel that
we're
big time.
basically at the end of our time here. Is there anything else that you want to share in terms of last words of wisdom about what you've learned about fear in your life?
Hmm. I don't know. I mean, yeah, when I think to fear, I just think about how different the word or what a different role it plays in my life now. And
Mm,
I think what I really want people to know is that the little societal fears or the day-to-day fears around everyday inner drama or like friend drama or family drama, like I don't know, there's a way out of it and it doesn't have to be so exhausting. There is a way to live a joyful, amazing life, and I will forever be grateful for this lineage and this path, and for the tools, and for meeting you, and for you
mm,
holding that light for me, and giving me the life activation and whatnot. And
pleasure.
what'd you say?
I said my pleasure.
Yeah, it was, yeah. So I'll forever just be so grateful. And it's nice to have fears around, yeah, like am I fulfilling my purpose or how can I help people more? And I just really want more people to get to that place because I know deep down that everybody actually wants that for themselves. Like everybody I meet, like they want to be operating at a bigger level, and I just want people to
Mm,
know that it's possible.
awesome. Yay. Well, thank you so much for coming on tonight, Rachel. It's been such a pleasure. I love
Yeah,
these conversations and I've had a great time. So
yeah,
thank you
me too,
for
Jordan.
your presence.
Always a pleasure to see you, and thanks for all you're doing in the world.
Likewise, you too. Take care. Have a great night, and we'll see you all next week for next episode of Unveiling. Take care.